And we're back on the Bill Face. I'm your host, Mr. Ben, and today I'm joined by recent Dice Throne World Cup champion, Kamui. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It sounds so fancy when put that way.
Hey man, I'm just saying facts. Like Muhammad Ali said, it's not bragging if it's true, right?
Fair enough.
So I suppose today we're going to get a little bit of a running start. While I do want to focus on the finals specifically and kind of the road to the finals through Dice Throne World Cup, I figure we'll kind of rewind and start with what was your introduction into gaming? Is there a game that kind of sucked you into this as a hobby? How long have you been a gamer? Like
Right on.
I'll stop
Um,
loading the question and let you answer.
no, all good. Like if you want to start from the very beginning, video games, absolutely. Childhood from then on, and I was not fanboyish. Like, started with the Sega Genesis. Brother had a Nintendo. I got a Super Nintendo, then an N64, then a PlayStation 1 and 2, then an Xbox 360 and Xbone, and now I have like a Switch back there, and Wii and Smash Bros. Brawl was what my college experience was, and now I predominantly game on PC. So as far as video gaming, not a fanboy, all the above. It just depends upon where I'm at in life. And as far as board gaming, I want to say it was probably DC Deck Builder, and it's actually got its 10-year anniversary going on right now on Kickstarter. Remember going to a friend's house, like friend of girlfriend at the time, sort of thing, and just loved it. And sort of just other than that, and a couple of others, like some of the standards, like Betrayal on House on the Hill and stuff like that. Really medium level casual board gaming. Catan sort of missed me, but around that era of just like second renaissance of board gaming, about a decade ago, probably inaccurate to describe it like that.
It feels
And
kind of fair. I'm sure there's
right,
probably some old schoolers who would be like, no, 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 the second
no,
Renaissance was
like
in 1972, but
right,
eh.
like how dare you? Yeah, and technically that was the '90s when Catan came out. You fake fan, but
Yeah.
but anyway, it was probably that where I started with like tabletop gaming, and then D&D like my third year of college. But otherwise, I would say board gaming sort of came to a head with my circle of friends whenever we discovered Dice Throne, actually, which was the last PAX South, and which was only the second one I've been to. I went to the second to last one and last one. Yeah, PAX South died with COVID, unfortunately, in San Antonio. But me and a group of three friends, so four of us total. Well, three of us went the first year. We brought a fourth the second year we went. Dice Throne was in the exact same spot the second year. I did not see it the first year at all. Don't know how. Like, it must have just been like con overload. Like, I've been going to A-Con, big old anime convention in Dallas usually for over a decade. So, you would think you'd be used to that like sensory overload of like, yeah, there's a lot to see. Well, I still managed to miss Dice Throne, I guess,
Yeah,
or it didn't grab my
I've
attention
never
at the
gotten used
time.
to it.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just so
yeah,
overwhelming. I love exclusively walking through dealers' rooms and people watching and stuff like that. We saw that other than the art grabbing your attention because it's very lovely. Saw that there were tons of tables as well. So it's like, whatever this is, this has a following. This is a big deal. Walked up, guy happy to teach us because the table was like just clearing up, with the demo sections. We all sat down. Like, it was sort of like a 1v1 situation, but in the other chairs were Barbarian and Moon Elf. I think it was, the other classic starters like Gunslinger and Samurai and the others, and they were being taught. But we sort of like learned by watching and started ourselves as well. So then eventually just maybe did a 2v2. I can't remember. I've slept since then. Then come to realize the guy who's teaching us is the guy whose name is on the box. It was Nate. So obviously, extremely excited, extremely knowledgeable. Duh, he made the game.
sure.
Had an absolute blast. It stole the show. It stole the packs for us, if you will. Like, we went about our days throughout the entire weekend, but three of us bought season two at the time, and you could late pledge for season one and Dice Stone Adventures. I did that as well. The whole weekend we kept coming back to playing Dice Throne, then going back to them and asking overthinking questions. That's when that started. Nate, I'm really sorry. Um, because that is a trend that has never quit.
Games
Um,
need rules lawyers, man. They serve an
I guess
important
so.
purpose. Yeah.
So the least I tried to do is pay it forward on the Discord and Facebook groups, but just really grew to just keep coming back to it. Like, it hit that everyone has their skill to luck ratio that they love. Dice Throne is exactly where the closest to exact I've ever experienced as far as what my preference is. It's quick to teach, especially if anyone has even the slightest experience with gaming. It's real easy to teach, and in tournaments you'll see the same people make the top four consistently. So there is tons of skill to be had as well. Um, Early introduction, you can absolutely Dunning Kruger yourself into saying, "Oh yeah, this is pretty easy. I get everything."
It's a little
I
deeper than
definitely have
that.
experience that show otherwise. Yeah.
I mean, variance does play an important role in games. If we wanted to play games without variance, chess is there. It's been
Yeah.
there all along, and there's a reason it's been an enduring game. But it's also the reason it's not like everybody's favorite game. The better player pretty much wins every chess game. Whereas in something like Dice Throne, even if you're a less seasoned or a less skilled player, the randomness, the variance being injected into it, gives those players a chance to take down somebody who's maybe on paper
Oh
better
yeah.
than they are. And I think that's an important element across a lot of games. The games that you mentioned before didn't seem super competitive. As far as a game group, were you guys into 1v1 dueling style games before, or was it more the co-op stuff or the kind of like everybody free for all like Catan? I know you said Catan missed you, but what was I'm
Right.
trying to get a temperature check on what your game group was like prior to being introduced to Dice Throne at PAX.
We tried to meet monthly for board games, like just make a whole day of it, like a whole weekend day, because we live, furthest to furthest, we live about an hour and a half's travel apart from each other. Predominantly for us, it was video gaming, like League of Legends for several years, like around season 2 or 3 for about 4 or 5 years after that, and then several of us slowly waned out of that. And three of us in particular predominantly have Rocket League as our staple, and then it's always Rocket League and something else. And the something else could be anything between Apex to Valheim to whatever other flavor of the week or month. Right now it's Elden Ring, or at least Elden Ring's kind of waning. It was that.
Everybody's
Um,
talking about Elden Ring.
yeah, just big Dark Souls, as one of my friends called it. Just absolutely hyped for that one, which has been a ton of fun. It's cooperative for us towards competitive things, I guess. But as far as our board gaming, it's pretty much cooperative nowadays. It's like stuff like Madara, or I recently tried Tiny Epic Dungeons. Got that fulfilled recently. But a couple competitive things like Thunderstone Quest was one that we played at PAX actually, and that was fun. And it's sort of deck buildery, dungeon exploring, but like a deck builder, it's competitive. Honestly, my board game history is pretty casual and typically cooperative, or if it is competitive, it's party stuff like Mafia or Cards Against Humanity. So I'm honestly not that heavy of a board gamer. We're slowly getting there, like as far as getting into light into medium with like stuff like Too Many Bones and all that, waiting for stuff like that to fulfill. But it's still all usually co-op. We're getting old. We're getting into our mid 30s. My circle of friends. Well, at least I am. I just hit
Hey now,
35 this
man.
month.
I've collected a
Right.
few more than that. Slow down. I don't know if
I
we're
mean,
old
yeah,
yet. But
just
overall, kind of what I was
blend the
getting at
hairline.
is it doesn't sound like you come from like the background of, hey, we're going to spend an entire weekend grinding the same two magic deck matchups to figure out correct
Right.
line choice and like that type of competitive gaming experience, which well, Dice Throne isn't quite to the point of having to grind the same matchup 900
Right.
times. The more reps you put in, I still think the better overall you get at choosing lines. And this is kind of more in that vein than like DC Deck Builder would be, for example.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was certainly a sense, there was an early confidence with Dice Throne of like, yeah, I know exactly what you're supposed to do to play the most optimally.
Into like your first tournament with that kind of attitude, like, oh, I got this.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It was
Did that
so.
work out, or was that a little bit of a rude awakening?
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was a very rude awakening.
Yeah.
It was my first one was Dice Throne Online Championship 3. Yeah, DTOC 3. Um, and all the above of my online gaming is on my YouTube channel for the sake of pure posterity. I don't have a following. I just like, be the change you want to be in the world. Whenever I first learned of competitive dice throwing, there wasn't a ton of it online, so I was like, well, I've got the setup. I can do this, so I might as well stream and upload my games so that others who are similar, who are like, I would love to see what this looks like. It's a tournament game. Well, here's Here are examples.
I think Gandhi definitely intended this specific example when he said that quote too.
Absolutely. I'm
Sorry, I
telling you,
kind of
man.
broke the
Like,
flow
yeah,
of your
like
thought
be
there.
the change. Yeah, be the video game change you want to be, or board game rather.
So,
But
so
yeah,
was it dice throwing
right. That
itself that kind of pulled you into the more competitive aspect of gaming? Was this something that you had kind of maybe thought about doing, but just not done it? Or like I'm trying to figure it because for a lot of people, the bridge from casual to competitive is that gap is big, and I don't think it should be as big as it is for a lot of people. So, like I'm trying to hone in on what got
like
past
where
whatever intimidation factor that was. Was there maybe some hubris tied up in that, thinking you knew it? But like, what was that transition from just playing with the same guys to like, hey, I want to play this competitively against other
right.
people?
Well, a lot of it was so that entire first year, like of 2020, was a struggle to see very many human beings at all. But the few opportunities I did have would be, especially after being able to get vaccinated or what have you, would be showing it to family and friends. Like it was immediately like 2020 was the like, did you come into my house? Cool. Check out this game. And that was all of my and it was almost exclusively 2v2s. It was me and my wife. Usually we would split up so that both teams would have someone who knows how to
Sure.
play being able to explain to the other new person, like we showed her parents, we showed my parents, I showed my brother's family, showed all of our friends, like whether they be theater friends or just fellow board gaming friends or what have you. Like tabletop, like D&D and stuff like that. So that was what all of 2020's games were, and it was that satiated my Dice Throne itch that year, absolutely. But come about 2021 or so, everyone who hadn't been exposed to it yet had art. Everyone who I'd wanted to show it had been shown it. Played when it came up, but no one else had the drive I did. Even amongst the four that discovered it at PAX South, I was the one most obsessed. And just became a rules aficionado, like overthinking every possible question I could think of, asking the Discord, trying to pay it forward by answering other questions that others would have that I knew the answer to. Always prefacing with, I think this or I believe that, because,
Sure.
like, I'm not official, like, and I'm not a learned scholar on this yet, that year especially. So it was always sort of prefaced with, I believe this or I think that, just to make sure, because the idea of forwarding wrong information is a cardinal sin to me. But anyway,
That's
so
fair.
2021 comes around.
There are
What?
definitely rules people out there who do not have that like program running in their brain where they worry about maybe being wrong and just say wrong stuff like with totally unearned confidence. So yeah, it's okay to be a little like self-conscious about that. That's good.
Confidently incorrect is just like, nails on a chalkboard, but, psychic
Yeah.
damage.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Nobody should want to be Homer Simpson.
yeah, fair.
Yeah, yeah, sorry.
2021 comes around. My wife is tired of playing against me because I win more often. And don't really have any other friends as obsessed as I am. So the tournament scene for me just became a means to an end of I want to play more often with other people who are just as obsessed about this as I am. And absolutely like fully convinced, like, yeah, I know the optimal way to play. Like you always save your dice mods for making your opponent whiff. That's obvious, like most bang for your buck. That one CP card might have saved you 8 damage as opposed to it only increasing your attacks from a small to a large straight, maybe increasing 3 or 4 damage. So obviously you dice hate this, like, and that's really all there is to the strategy. Like, and first game, like DTOC3, I want to say, my opponent stops rolling after the second roll and locks in their attack. And it was like, huh, okay, there's so much more to this. Uh-oh. That exclusive, like, uh-oh moment. And I don't remember how it started. I want to say so there's a Dice Throne guru amongst the community. His username is Slip Capone. Slip messaged me, and I think publicly at first, and said, "Hey, I don't mean to be rude, but if you're down for it, I would like to offer you some advice." And I said, "Oh yes, please." And so we started direct messaging. He hit me up with a lot of tips. Where I was struggling, I reached out to Amy. She's in the Discord a lot as well. With asking for Shadow Thief advice because she was a
Oh, that's the
very, very
person
learned
behind
Shadow Thief
the
player.
Dice Throne podcast, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So shout out to the
Has
Dice
the
Throne
homebrew.
podcast.
Yeah,
I like that YouTube channel a great deal.
yeah, she helped me out a lot with improving Shadow Thief play. Slip helped me out a lot with pirate play because those are my two characters. I just took the most quote unquote overpowered ones because I was like, yeah, that'd be simple enough. Just pick the strongest ones without having any real knowledge because I almost never got to play pirate because it was always my wife's favorite character. So I got to
Oh,
see
sure.
pirate a lot, but not play it a lot. That was another thing I enjoyed about being able to be in the tournament. I got to play the pirate. uh, Received a lot of advice and got a lot of hard knocks there in that group stage, and because it was similar to the World Cup one where there was a group stage, and your win loss ratio on that would have like the top however many from each group advance into a more single elimination tournament after that. And I barely squeaked out of our group stage. There was one player who just beat everybody. I think he didn't. I think he went undefeated. And then when there were three of us whose like win loss was like tied for second, but I went to game three more often, so that was the only reason that I squeaked by. And yeah, from then on it was like, or at least no, yeah, like my octafinal was a very good player who I didn't know much about, and then quarterfinal was a beta tester. Semifinalist was Johnny Sixes himself, as he's known amongst the community. He's the leader of the beta test team. And then the finalist after that was the one who beat John's brother, who is just as good as he is. So that was like almost an anime climb of just like just every opponent is like
Like the Mortal Kombat
um,
ladder.
yeah, just straight up. And somehow it just kept working out for me. Like there were plenty of games that I just felt like I sort of stole there, but so that was that tournament, and then you put on the next couple. Thank you so much for that. Being a
It,
tournament organizer is
for the exact same reason as you just outlined. My friend group didn't want to play as much Dice Throne as me. Dice Throne Online Championship was just never firing. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing it. Like, I'm gonna put on it.
right. Yeah,
Normally, I
there you
don't
go.
like playing in my own events because that can get a little. If there's like a rules issue or something, like,
Right. Yeah.
I don't feel super great about it. But I was like, I want to play Dice Throne, and nobody will play with me, so I'm playing in my own event.
Yeah. That was exactly it for me. Yeah, pretty much. Won that one too. There were a couple games on that one that I didn't deserve. Like I absolutely got very lucky in that like my opponent had me dead to rights, but I had a card in my hand and two CP showing, so they didn't lock in an earlier roll and chased something that they thought would be less open to me futzing with. And it ended up that that didn't defeat me, so I was able to beat them on my next turn. And it was like I had nothing, man. I'm so like I got so lucky on that. Like I'm sorry I psyched you out practically because you had me
Always
dead to
so
rights.
apologetic when you win.
And my wife hates that.
Yeah, as someone
She's
who's
like, I
lost to you a
ran.
couple times, I'm not a fan either.
Yeah. My wife is like, I would rather you just say, "Yeah, I kicked your butt," as opposed to just being like, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I rolled an alter."
Oh,
And I make that
what's
sound
high
like a,
score mean? Did I break it?
did I break it? Yeah. So I don't know what that is, but it's just my nature apparently. So all of last year, especially to take a step back, hopefully really quickly, all of last year was community theater building one up back from the ground up that had nearly died from COVID. So my wife was extremely busy directing tons of plays. And local theater always needs men, so she would pull me in to take parts in them as well. So just been run very ragged that year. By the time of that little holiday blitz that you ran over the December last year came, I was just worn out. And on my first game, this was very cute. I played against a dad whose son I had beat in your tournament, and so it was almost like he was sort of like avenging his kid. And it was I played. You could play whoever you wanted every game. I played pirate. Just I should have just played someone else for fun, but I played pirate. Like I was try harding or something. and he played Gunslinger and beat the snot out of me. It was like 30-0, just like large straights all over the place, like evasives firing off, every defense roll succeeding. Like it was a stomp. Like it was so cool. Like I hope that dad's a hero to his kid. But
That's awesome.
after that I was super casual and I lost all four in a row. Like I was the only one in that tournament who lost all four. It was just surreal. Just but I hopefully came off and was genuinely just chill about the whole thing. I was just enjoying being able to play almost in a casual mentality of like, hey, I get to play a little bit, sort of just wind down and play. But then for the next two, which would be the third strike one that you had, and or strike three rather. Sorry, Street Fighter there.
It's all good.
Um, and the World Cup one, which was a delightfully cheeky name. I still love that so much. You know, like this is a brand new tournament created by an individual. What's it called? It's called the World Cup. Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna try hard now.
Yeah,
You're
dude.
darn right I am. The conquest mode of like you have to win with both your heroes in a best of three was commonplace, but this one was the first one to my knowledge. No, maybe yours was actually. I'm sorry, details.
It's all
But
good.
um, yeah, I think the last few at least, added in that whole bring three ban one thing. So I just added Pyro in there because again I just sort of heard like yeah it's the strongest one, and you know I'd played plenty of 2v2, played plenty of Dice Zone Adventures co-op. Like you know I was cognizant of arguably like you know because it's so hard to balance an asymmetrical game, and they have absolutely done the best job of it that is humanly possible. I would argue like with how dynamic and fun every character is. Like casually before tournaments I didn't have a favorite, absolutely didn't. I would play whoever. Like I thought everyone was cool. um Vampire Lord aesthetically was my first favorite. I liked Seraph a lot after that. But I was just cool with randomizer cards. I'll play anybody. um but and with the tournament, I just sort of went with what I thought the meta was, quote unquote, you know. Um, and I've been sort of doing that ever since. I feel like I should switch that up just for the sake of not being a one-trick pony.
I don't
um,
know, man. I like playing Shadow Thief a lot. Like
oh my
my
gosh, the amount of mirror matches I've had with that these last couple tournaments.
and they're
Just
all
like, all right,
so
strap in. This is
long.
an hour.
Well, I guess let's get into group stage. So we were both in the Central Division in the DTWC, as was a handful of other fairly well-known players. It
Yeah,
felt
yeah,
like a murderer's row in Central Division, to be honest.
absolutely. There was not a clear cut by the end of it, you know, like the win loss spread I felt like was pretty dynamic.
Yeah,
So I really enjoyed that format of okay, here's your seven opponents or however many, and you have one more of that number of weeks to get all your matches out of the way whenever is convenient for the two of you schedule amongst yourselves, which was super handy for anyone who has a vacation week where they're going to be gone or what have you. You're not going to miss a match and have to take an automatic loss or bye or tie or whatever.
sure.
Um, so those of us who were like, yeah, let's play, like blitz through our games at first, like you know, in the first couple weeks, like played 3-4 games, you know, and got a lot of them out of the way. And I won the first three in a row and felt like I was on a real hot streak there with that. But I believe I lost the fourth one, and yeah, I lost the next one as well. So at that point I was 3-2, and then it was our match, you and me,
Hmm.
and you were undefeated, I think, at the time.
I was 4-0. Yeah,
Yeah, so I was like, crap, I have got to win this one against the one who's trouncing right now, or I will have no chance to get out of the group stage. And yeah, that match was a lot of fun because the only other time mirror matched in a tournament with Shadow Thief, it was against, or at least like the last one that was fresh in my mind was against Johnny Sixes himself, you know? And it was an hour long, and he absolutely outpatiented me for the win. Like I can pinpoint the moment in that match where my patience wore thin. I made a poor choice, and it was a slow loss after that. Like you, it's it's so funny. Like I can exactly point on that one, and it's where I just go for. an attack where I should have just kept building up resources. Like, and from then on, he just always had a little bit more resources than me, and it just, yeah, it was a
That's kind
slow
of the
bleed
key to
after
that
that.
matchup is the resource. The most important resource is like your CP and cards more than your health in the Shadow Thief mirror, I think.
Oh yeah, and even in general, I've felt that with the finals match. I mean, we'll get into that later, but yeah, like the card draw is almost never a bad choice. It's so funny. If
Yeah.
you can, if if it graces you with fives, you keep them.
Well, I guess since we're kind of getting there anyway, we can just skip right ahead to the finals. I mean, there was a moment where you rolled five fives, and I was sitting there in the chat, and I was like, "It's a card alt copia." Yes.
And I had 7 cards in hand. I'd had 6 from the previous turn, and I didn't play any or what have you. So I drew my 7th. See that, that I rolled a couple fives, and I loved every card in my hand. I was like, this is gonna be really tough to like. Am I gonna just draw garbage because I don't really want to part with any of these? Yeah, that's a big thing as far as like strategy and all that. Do not do anything you do not have to do, and do not force anything, and that will get you through a lot of the, let's say, more or less experienced players. Do not force anything. Like, is your second roll a small straight? Stop. Don't go for your large straight. Stop, because if they mess with your dice, you have resources left. Could you sell this card because you don't think it's useful? Are you going to use that CP this turn? No, don't sell it yet. Or, do you need that CP for at least scaring your opponent into thinking you have dice hate cards? Like, no. Like, or if you do, yeah, sure, go ahead and sell it. But if not, don't. Like, that card might be extremely useful later. And that might be me being too conservative with my play, a little bit too nervous. But that's what's worked for my play style. Is just slow down because sorry to keep jumping back and forth. To go into my tournament life, I was used to 2v2s. And it was, you'd only take 4 or 5 turns in a 2v2. So I was very used to just selling what I wasn't going to use, or didn't think I would get around to using it all, selling some upgrades that are much better in a 1v1 situation. And I would absolutely gas myself every time. Like turn 5 or 6 would roll around, and I would have no cards left, low CP, no resources left, and my opponent would outpace me from then on. Like I was absolutely sprinting when I should have marathoned. There's something to be said about, are you gonna have a good turn now? Well, take advantage of it. Like blow your resources on that because 12 damage hurts just as much now as it can later. You know, all other circumstances aside, but otherwise, yeah, like, and that's why I actually feel like I suck as barbarian. He's the only complexity one, and I suck as him. It's because I gas myself out every turn, or every time. Like, I feel like I run out of resources. He doesn't really have any built-in resource generation, and my opponent will build up stuff when I've run out of stuff because I'm not playing smartly with him. And it's just proving my point to myself that always sticks in my head. Like, you suck with the only one who is complexity 1. If you
In
can't follow your own
MMA,
advice with him.
there's an expression in MMA, and that's styles make fights. Uh, I think that applies in card games as well. And I realize Dice Throne isn't just a card game, but my background is TCGs, so I frame a lot of things that way. And playing the best deck, if it's a strategy that doesn't gel with how you think about the game, you're not going to get the best results. Like you're better off playing a tier 2 or a tier 3 even deck if it
Yeah.
works with how your brain works and your play style. You're going to have better overall results long run playing the stuff rather than trying to, I mean, like you said, don't force it. I think that applies to things like character selection within this game as well. If Barbarian
Yeah.
doesn't work for you, man, you got 15 other options. Don't force it.
Right? And like 8 more come, June if we're lucky.
Soon enough, man.
So
That's
really looking forward to that. That's gonna shake it up. I think that might actually be what causes me to change characters if there are tournaments that are like, yeah, throw in the Marvel characters or Marvel exclusive or whatever. There's a couple of them that I really gel with that I look forward to trying out because I didn't really have a favorite character before going into tournaments. I was but I knew that like Pirate was really cool, and I really wanted to play her, and I'd heard that she was very strong. I was super down with that one, and the Shadow Thief was exclusively a. I've heard that they're brokenly strong, quote unquote, in tournaments, so that was exclusively a pick of trying to just. Well, I don't have a favorite, so I'll pick who's the strongest, I guess.
Sure.
And I've grown to be a better player with Shadow Thief, but I still feel like Shadow Thief's probably my weakest. And adding Pyromancer has been an absolute blast as well. So both of those were who I've only actually done one full Dice Throne adventure campaign, start to finish. I've had several startup, but life gets in the way,
Sure.
adulthood. Um, but the one start to finish, I was Treant, and my wife was Pirate, and a friend of ours was Pyromancer. So I got to see them a ton, offer unsolicited advice like I do. My wife loves that too. And that sort of like cemented my like I would love to play these in a 1v1, in a tournament style rather than in a cooperative one because it's completely different like what is a wise play there compared to otherwise, which is what I love about it. Pyromancer I feel like I gel with a lot more as well, and Shadow Thief is still one of my weakest. But yeah, mirror matches with that one into our group stage one was I felt like I had something to prove because I lost to John. With that one exclusively from lack of patience, and that wouldn't be the last time I lose one from lack of patience either. So it's still a flaw.
Sure.
But yeah, after being able to beat you on that one, three of us went 4-2, and yeah, my second loss was to the person who was at that current win loss ratio point at the bottom of the group, and it was the same person I'd lost to in the last game of the winter one, the December Blitz one.
Sure.
So I was I was kind of like low, like getting onto myself on that one. Like, man, like you should have played better. Like, like what mistakes did you make? Like absolutely, because you can't control what your opponent does as far as, not to take away from anyone, any player. Like, you know, like heck yeah, like did you win? Well, you earned it. You won. But like, you can only control yourself as far as like what you can affect for future mentality or strategy or whatever. So it's like, what did I do wrong that prevented me from being able to win that one? So unfortunately, just because of real life busyness with theater and work and all that, I wasn't able to really practice, so to speak, but I was just basically repeating to myself the fundamentals that once again Slip has really like kind of helped cement for me. With the pirate, like you've got to focus on chaining powder kegs, stuff like that. Like with the Shadow Thief, you have got to be comfortable with going with the long game and being patient, even if you just took a ton of damage. Like it is not over, especially for the Shadow Thief, until you're. But this is true of every character. It is not over until your health hits zero.
After the group stages, your top eight match was against Missouri Ben, who
Yeah,
also had a very similar lineup to like he was that Shadow Thief. Was it Shadow Thief Ninja Monk was his lineup? I can look it up real quick.
yeah, it sounds right. And I believe I banned his Shadow Thief. And he
Yeah, he
probably
was
banned my
Shadow Thief
pirate.
Ninja Monk. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he was the first one I lost to in the group stage, so I felt like I had something to prove there. Like I want to play someone not in our group before I get knocked
Nope.
out. So, um, so I went
You
into
did
that.
not get
I
the
went into that
opportunity to
one.
do that.
Yeah, I went into that one with a sense of like I got something to prove here too, and with the most memorable part of that one for me was my Shadow Thief one because my opening hand was magical. Like it was already set for late game. I didn't even have to do like your three-step program of like cards, then CP, and then death.
Yeah.
Step one was done for me from the opening draw. I had like twice as wild and plenty of other very good cards. So I just went like 2 turns building CP and then going for large straights or ults. I feel like I struggled terribly with consistently getting a large straight with Shadow Thief when I'm at high CP. You look at my early tournament games of Shadow Thief, and it's nuts. It's like, how is this working? This does not deserve to work because it's a low CP Shadow Thief, just using every mod in its every single card you could into exclusively making shadow defense, not whiff, getting shadows out of it, and just hoping that the opponent dies of boredom and poison. It is a strange way to play, but an absolutely fun one. I'd say the last time I showcased that very well was probably the build phase tournament, the first one of yours, whenever I got a rematch against Argonjet.
Who was also in the
So
Central Division.
poor guy, he is smarter than me at this game. Absolutely, the man has written strategy guides, and I feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I have read them. I agree with them. I practically follow them, or sometimes use them as a quick reference right before a match when I didn't have time to practice. Like, okay, what is his advice when playing Curse Pirate against this character? Okay, all right, cool. And his advice on that one. Okay, cool. And then that's all the time I had for prep.
We
But
should
yeah,
also say those strategy guides are on Board Game Geek. They're fabulous.
yeah,
I
on the
highly
strategy
recommend them to
section,
everybody.
yeah. Um, Honestly, all the ones written on that one are very good sources if you're looking for tournament level advice when it comes to dice throwing. Bringing up Argon because poor guy, I've played him twice and beaten him at game two both times, and he doesn't deserve it. Like, I reiterate, he's a smarter player than I am. It's just the dice have been cruel. So yeah, the quarters was where I felt like I had something to prove because I wanted to both beat someone who I'd lost to in the past and play against someone not in our division.
So your top four match was me. Your
It
top eight
was you.
match was
Okay.
Missouri Ben. Yeah. So you didn't see
Yeah,
anybody
but we
outside
just
of the
did not.
Central Division until the final table.
Yeah. Sorry, like I've had so many Shadow Thief mirror matches. I almost banned your Shadow Thief just for the sake of like not having that happen.
Considering that our group stage match was draw Shadow Thief mirror, like I did not want to do that again in top four. I was like, somebody's got to shake this up. And apparently, in that game of chicken, I was the one who blanked and mixed it up, and it did not pay off for me.
Our first mirror match only took half an hour, if I remember right, but our second one took the full hour that you expect for a Shadow Thief mirror match, where you're just absolutely building up resources constantly. You never feel comfortable, you never feel safe until your opponent's health hits zero, which is sort of a common feeling with tournaments, especially. You'll be so wrapped up in just fearing what your opponent has, absolutely convinced that they've got the bye, they've got the not this time, they've got the dice hate card that they haven't played yet. Like, their hand is absolutely optimized to defeat you. And I don't exactly know how or if this is even wise a perspective, but that is almost the mentality I go into every turn, especially late game when you feel like there's only going to be one or two turns left. I just assume the worst and play hoping for the best as far as like, okay, like if he's got the bye and like this like this next turn is going to be awful, but hopefully it's not the dice mod, so I should try to win now because he hasn't played the bye yet, which is the Shadow Thief's kryptonite. Absolutely, try to assume the worst. Hi, Finn. You try to hope for the best, but assume the worst, which is good advice in a lot of aspects of life, I guess.
Sure.
As long as you don't overthink it. As long as you don't overthink it too much, because there will absolutely come that moment where you just got to go for it. I did in the finals to poor results for the first game, but sometimes you have to do that.
Well, let's drill down on that finals game, specifically that first turn. So game one of your finals against Foxy,
Man,
you had a particularly poor turn one. Kind of unpack what was going on there.
sure. I'll go to Vegas for a solid one. I had a feeling.
Yeah, that's the standard.
Sweet, I sold the card. Okay.
Honestly, yeah.
And just do pirate things and go straight to rolling after that.
That's it.
Okay. 2, 3, 3, 5, 6. Oh, how's the glare? I can kind of. Okay.
Nah, that's fine. I
that
can read
helps a
them.
little bit. Okay, good.
Legible, man.
Let's see. I'm gonna keep 5, 6. See what else I can turn that into. Another 6 and 1, 3. Okay. Not really what I'm looking for, so I'll pick it up one more time. Okay. Oh my goodness. Wow.
It's not what you want.
I hate to say it, but that's a whiff. So I, as the pirate, overvalue 5 and 6 when I don't really like anything else in my roll, but I see a 5 and a 6. I immediately assume pick up the other 3 dice, and you will extremely easily roll a walk the plank. Like it's a given. It is a safe bet. And I have done that in tournaments before that match and whiffed. Like specifically 2 6s. I hate 2 6s with the pirate because that's one of the few ways you can whiff. As far as dice spreads, just about the only way is probably having 2 6s. Because everything else, even if it's just a wee little cutlass strike, wee little basic attack, it'll be something. But that's how you can whiff. And I picked up the dice the second time. It didn't turn into walk the plank, and I didn't have any dice mods in hand, but I still thought to myself, this couldn't happen 2 rolls in a row. I pick them up, I whiff. I had a vestige of hope still in me because a whiff turn 1, which is funny because a whiff anytime sucks. I remember hearing the stats that like if you whiffed, your chances of winning in like previous DTOCs was like, I want to say it was like 8%, maybe 5. It was terrible. Like whiff 1 and you have lost almost exclusively. But turn 1, I kind of Jedi mind trick myself into thinking, well, they haven't taken a turn yet either, so just now pretend that their player won. You still have a chance. It's okay. That's not how math works, but it's fun to pretend. And Foxy is absolutely so. This was a lot of fun, especially for Slip, because I was his first student, so to speak. Absolutely think of him as like the guru of the Dice Throne discords. And Foxy in real life is someone who, in a different part of Australia, was dominating his local tournament scene. They both sort of were, so they befriended each other and talked tips, tricks, and experiments and practice stuff like that. So became real life friends. So it was his first student versus his Dice Throne like Aussie friend. So this match was probably a blast for him to watch, and I hope I didn't disappoint too much by starting with a whiff. But I would say my morale absolutely tanked a couple of turns later, where I rolled for the high stakes and it failed. So there's 2 CP and a card down the drain for nothing. So at that point, I was just deflated completely. I actually rewatched the games in prep for this, and dare I say, it didn't show too much. But I did decide at the end there on my last turn, excuse me, that I wasn't going to live another turn. I needed a Hail Mary and ult, even though I had nothing. So it was leaving it up to the 1%, chance of naturally ulting. And it did what it should do and didn't work out. He took the game handedly. I wish I'd given him a better match because that was absolutely the highest level like ninja player play that I'd experienced at least. I really feel like Ninja is a pocket pick to the cliche North American meta of Pyromancer, Cursed Pirate, and Shadow Thief. Because undefendable damage is very, very common, or at least can be, and I feel like that's a big counter to them, especially because their defense roles are so impactful, or have the potential to be. And that was a bit of a shame. I felt like that I didn't give Ninja the match that Foxy deserved or that Ninja deserved. And I just thought to myself, calm down, slow down, calm down, be smarter. And with that in mind, I switched to the Shadow Thief for the second game, which was going to be against Monk. And I had lost to that one in a slow, painful way against Missouri Ben as Monk. And I think the second game, that was the one where just I drew the perfect hand, so it was just so much quicker for me on the second one. It almost didn't even feel like I got any decent practice against the Monk because the dice and card gods were in my favor that particular match. So But that was after losing a painful mirror match of the finals of Dice Throne Strike 3, where I just kept attacking over and over again. My opponent's at 7 health. Just keep attacking, they'll lose. And I did that like 4 or 5 turns in a row. Everyone turned up a shadows, and he out-resourced me and beat me with a very, very powerful ult for the win, where Poison finished me off after, I think. And that one was where I learned the lesson of like never stop building your engine as a Shadow Thief, especially after you've successfully built your engine the first time. Your engine's going to break because you're going to spend your resources. Build it back up. Don't gas yourself. Don't be a barbarian and gas yourself. Like, the advice never stops being handy. Repeat it in your brain over and over and over again, because you will forget it and you'll stumble in a game where you shouldn't have, or where you could have not have. So many contractions. Pardon that.
It sounds
Yeah,
like there's kind
after
of a theme of when you take defeats, you go back and analyze your play and pick out things that could have been done better. And often you mention, oh, this is the matchup where I learned X lesson that I applied in future matchups, and here's where it was relevant. Is that kind of a fair summary of your process, that a lot of the learning comes out of stubbing your toe more than success?
Yeah, and I got extremely lucky in that when I first started doing that, was whenever Slip would break down, bless his heart, he would watch like the whole match and break down like, okay, in this turn you did this, and I would perhaps have done that, or what have you, or I think that was a mistake and here's why, or things like that. And early on there were tons of mistakes because I was playing like I was a 2v2 player, especially. So my immediate start with Dice Throne tournaments was getting turn by turn breakdown feedback, and just taking it to heart, because fortunately I was very shaken up from being completely incorrect on what the meta is as far as mentality or how you play, or things like that, what to value and what to chase, when to do so, and things like that. So I got advice from someone who just loves to teach, and I fortunately was in a headspace where I applied that advice. And so from then on, like, he stopped giving me like game by game advice, by now, but this was, I actually checked in my Discord. It was a year ago this month where our direct messages started. It's true in almost any competition. If you're winning, it's hard to tell yourself you need to innovate. You
Hmm.
need to practice new things. You need to really find out what else there is to learn, because in a weird way, it's almost like the world is telling you you don't need to adapt yet. You don't need to evolve yet. You're winning. So it takes a loss sometimes to remind yourself you do not know everything, or you are going to slide into old mistakes if you're not careful. So sometimes you have to relearn the same lesson several times. Uh, um, so yeah, absolutely. Like, I calmed down, and I basically approached it like, give the give the community a good match here. Like, you were absolutely poorly playing on the first one. You did an unforced error to start. Be better.
So
The
just to frame this correctly, you becoming champion wasn't about you. It was an act of philanthropy to give this performance to the community. Is that what's being said here?
I do like to pat my own back in trying to word it in such a way that doesn't uh sound like I'm patting my own back to myself. Others can smell my BS pretty quickly because they're not me, and they're not blindsided, forest for the trees when it comes to thinking you're absolutely coming from the best of intentions at all times and nothing is self-centered. No, no, no.
I mean, does
And so
framing it that way, does that help your headspace to sort of think of it less
it
of
helps mine,
as
yeah,
like an
because it
athletic competition, but more as like a performance where you have to do this for the audience? I mean,
yeah,
knowing
and
that
that's fair because I've
you're
been
also an actor, that seems to kind of be on brand a little bit.
yeah, I've been doing a boatload of theater the last year or two, especially. I did theater all 4 years of high school. Loved it. It was high school competitive speech. one act play for the first half of year, individual events after that. Got an all-state jacket out of it. And then I took a break off of acting for a decade. Then I started dating my now wife, and she was heavily involved in community theater, and I knew I was going to be too. If I was, going to have a relationship.
That is how
with
that
her.
works, yeah.
And fortunately, I had the background to be able to slide into that easily. I was of use because I was a man for local community theater. They always need more men. Support local community theater. Also had a background enough to where, dare I could say, I at least had some talent in the topic. It is definitely I want to win. I'm playing a competitive thing. I want to win. But the other part of it that helps me not be too selfish about it, or too self-centered about it, or too blindsided in hateful victory, or hateful, like, I'm going to beat the crap out of you, because that sort of feels too anger-based for me. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I just remember a movie quote that was like, anger lowers your IQ. So in a way
Oh no,
to
that's true.
in a way to like be motivated but not be anger based motivated, I supplement that I want to win with, like, I want to have done a good job, not just for myself but for the sake of both, like, the internet and my opponent. Like, it's this weird almost cognitive dissonance, but I managed to frame them in the same headspace of, like, I want to kick butt, but I also want to be friendly while doing it, and also just performing at my peak, and at my peak is not angry.
I mean, as somebody who was watching it, game one looked
Uh-huh.
like the nerves had got to you. And game two, you seem to be much calmer. Uh, and I mean, obviously, when you get the result you want, it's a better game than when you don't get the result you want, of course.
Right, fair, yeah.
So
But yeah,
once you get through this game two, where was your headspace? Now you're 1-1. You've kind of got your sea legs underneath you, so to speak, going into the pirate match. I suppose that pun is unintended, but works. Um, what kind of pressure were you feeling coming into game three?
at that point, I was just like, we've done a good job. Like, we've got to game three now, so this is going to be a good best of three, one way or another. So that was my philanthropic headspace of, like, okay, you've done a good job, and you can remain calm and happy about that. But my competitive side was, you just lost with the pirate, chasing something you shouldn't, and I still did chase it the third game with a 4 and a 6 instead of a 5 and a 6. But that's neither here nor there. um, I was still able to, like, add the competitive edge to my headspace of, like, you just lost with a pirate. Prove that you're worth a darn at it. Yeah, my headspace was sort of like acquiescent to going with the flow, but I had just enough of that. I still want to win though, to be able to be calm, but also play to the best of my ability. That was a fascinating game. Apparently, Australians have a lot more paladin and monk, not necessarily at the same time, but have that in their meta a lot more compared to just the cliche North American ones of pirate, pyro, shadow thief. The beginning of the game, I'm lucky enough to get off a lot of chained powder kicks before he's able to set up his cleanse barrier, so to speak. Since he can hold up to 3 of those, that is very cruel against, honestly, a lot of the North American meta. So honestly, maybe, who knows, maybe in a year or two we'll see it to where the Aussies know what's up, and that's what the counter is to that. And then eventually we'll see counters to those counters, and it'll be a little bit more robust, a tier list, so to speak. Like, there will be divergent opinions. And who knows, Marvel may shake that up or it may stagnate it. I have no idea. Looking forward to learn either way. That one started out very strong for me in that I got very lucky into a large straight and then chained a lot of kegs, and that was like the second time I was chaining kegs. So the health bars were very differential. And by turn 2 of the monk, I loved his monk showcase in both games, because the first one was all aggro. Like, as soon as, like, no chi to block damage, because he knew that you cannot out engine, you cannot out late game a shadow thief. No one can. So any opportunity he had to add chi to damage, did 20 damage to me in the first 2 turns. I think it's 50 to 30, so that looked frightening. But had tons of cards in hand. Like, you stay calm as Shadow Thief. Like, he's a late game son of a gun. That's what he does.
Mhm.
But then for Cursed Pirate, completely flipped. Every chi was exclusively for defense. Complete tank or turtle, however you like to call it. monk on that one. Exclusively rolling meditate every other turn, if not every turn, if every time it was spent near the middle there. And absolutely chipping away at my health, and the only resources I'm gaining were my card draw and CP gain, maybe. I would take a turn high stakesing, and therefore drawing cards, maintaining doubloons to not flip early. Because I loved that realization I had pretty quick in the game of like, Monk is cruel with actually being able to sustain through the flipped Cursed Pirate's passive. Because they'll just get a cleanse off of the meditate, cleanse that powder keg from not doing an attack from a cursed, a skeletal side cursed pirate. So that's 5 damage that you can argue is undefendable damage in the form of the chi that you can add to whatever attack or defend. So that's like 5 difficult to interact with points of damage, whether for attack or defense, and a guaranteed 4 undefendable for the pirate when the pirate starts their turn flipped. So middle of the game, after I'd gotten a substantial lead, I realized that I'm stuck in a gridlock of I have to roll X marks the spot and hope that I get a doubloon, and then I have to wait for the monk to bless me with an attack that if I'm lucky, will also get a doubloon on, so that I can finally take an offensive turn that is not just X marks the spot. Because that one's going to do 6 undefendable at best, and that's not what I was rolling it for. I needed it to roll 6s.
Yeah.
So absolutely, like tank monking against a pirate was cruel. Like it was a great call. I could see the argument of maybe trying to go all out offense, but I have full faith that Foxy did tons of research and due diligence and came to the conclusion that Turtle Monk was the better choice. I mean, he whiffed. I think. I forget if it was a manufactured one from me, but he whiffed early, mid-early into the game. Okay.
Bad.
Spend 2 CP and play So Wild on a 6.
Yep.
Turn a 6 into a 1.
Into a 1. Nice. Okay. And then I'll use my last roll. See what I can do. Ugh. Nah, nothing. That's a whiff.
And still, it was close at the end. And I had a huge life lead from a large straight with tons of kegs chaining. And still, like, that gridlock that lasted several turns, like, just slowly beat me down to it being an even game. With a whiff, like, that boggles my mind. He played better than I did. I will argue that to this day. Like, if you want to take raw play and decision making, I would say he played better than me. I just hoarded dice mod resources, then looked at the back of my board before I flipped. I was going to flip anyway, so it was kind of moot to look at it, but I was like, give me a second, I'm going to look at this. So I had 14 health left, and saw that my ult did 13. I knew the keg wouldn't stick, cleanses or what have you. Figured, well, it'll inflict a doubloon. There's my 14th damage. And I got extremely lucky on that last turn after I flipped. He locked in a large straight pretty quick, and I was like, I don't care. Even if it was an ult, I probably would have not cared. But I was like, I don't care what you do. My next turn, I had twice as wild 6 and samesies, I think, in my hand. I did not care what his turn was. I was going to ult. Barring absolutely hateful dice. And at that point, I top deck a what status effects. And it is at that point that it dawns on me, he's got an evasive. That evasive could evade my cursed doubloon damage. Uh-oh. Well, I've just drawn the answer to that. That's kind of lucky rather than good on my part, but there you go. Unfortunately, I did not have to blow all of my resources to get that ult. I got 1 6 per roll, so got up to that third roll with 3 6s, immediately twice as wild. There's certainly a case to be made that maybe it would have been wiser to play the 6 or the samesies, because then I could hold on to the twice as wild if he didn't die. But at that point, I'd already come to the conclusion he's going to die on his upkeep, because I'm going to what stats affects him. Assuming I don't have to play, as long as I didn't have to play both 6-it and samesies after I played the twice as wild, to counteract his dice hate if he had any, And he only had one card, and his Twice as Wild was discarded. That was an impossibility at that point. So I went ahead and said, "That's all the decision making you're making. Like it's hard to express what exactly you're doing to win at a high level tournament setting. You're just considering every option, but trying to do so in a timely manner so that you're not holding up your opponent for 4 hours worth of a best of 3. Like, there's a certain social expectation of like, come on, man, like
Yeah.
even a Shadow Thief mirror match needs decisions to be made. It's that balance between getting used to playing online, and not letting the nerves of it get to you, and your setup hopefully being conducive and convenient for you. Like, shoot, like there's a player that I'm pretty sure played on the floor with their camera tripod during that one day tournament. It was top 500, I think. I noticed that he was either playing on his knees or standing up and going back and forth. It's like, you poor guy, like
Yeah.
that's got to be distracting. That's got to be so distracting. And he won the whole thing, so good on him. Not being able to constantly, unless you're willing to multitask that hard, because I've got like a little L-shaped desk here. My board is right here, and my camera's like over it, usually right here, and I have the opponent's board and stuff set up over here. If you want to be thorough and keep track of every movement of their status effects, their cards, their health CP, all of that, you can. And I did used to play that way. But lately, the only thing I'll do is move their upgrades onto the board, just so I can look at them from over here rather than through the camera. There's only 4 dice hate cards. There's only 4 status effect hate cards. I at least can keep track of what ones they have played or haven't played. But it's absolutely a wise call to, as they play cards, put them face up in the discard. Like grab their deck and like as they play through them, go through them. But if you don't have the setup or capability to multitask that hard, sometimes you're just going to have to play it by ear. But when you do that, you lose track of how many cards they have in hand. I ask that constantly, and just take it on faith and authority that they're moving their health and CP and tokens accurately, because I'll have the little status effects over here. Thank you for sending these, y'all, to me, by the way. I'll have the little status effect tokens over here and move them, but I usually don't even keep track of theirs anymore. I'll just take it on faith. And that's what I love about this community. It's extremely friendly, even when you're losing. Like, this game just lends itself to being fun and friendly. At least that's my perspective on it.
I mean, even in person at card game events where I'm sitting across the table from people, there's still a lot of cards in hand. Like that happens constantly, even when you're right there looking at each other. So over webcam, I think that's totally inbounds to ask that question.
Okay, right on. Good. The only other thing about that match, that final match, the game 3 between Foxy and I that I hadn't hit on, the closest thing to a mistake he might have made was that turn where I walked the plank, and it was an unfortunate. It was an unforced error. It was just extremely lucky, really. He had 2 cards in hand, 1 CP, and it was Helping Hand and his Twice as Wild. I was absolutely just going to steal the CP. Because I've actually gone back and forth on that. Slip and I disagreed on that at first. Which is better on Walk the Plank, steal or card discard? I always preferred steal, and at first he suggested otherwise, but he's actually kind of come around to my thinking as well, because when someone discards, they're going to discard their worst card. You steal all their CP, they can't afford any cards, or they're going to sell their worst cards all the same to afford their best cards. So it almost breaks even. Making them either discard a card or lose a CP, and they're gonna gain that CP back by discarding the card, their worst card. It's almost like the 2 choices break even among the opponent. But on that one choice, you also get CP. So pick that one.
Yeah.
At least that's my headspace on that one. I overvalue Walk the Plank probably, but that's what I like to do with it. Before I was able to lock it in, he played 1 CP and tried to make me whiff into what would most likely have simply been a 3-sword cutlass strike. Statistically on that reroll, he made me pick up the 6. I think I had 2 chests and 2 swords left. So it was either going to be another X marks the spot, which would have been painless, or it would have been a uh, basic attack cutlass strike, which would have been even less effective for me. But that was at the point where I had 4 dice mods in my hand. You know, the 6 at the same season, the twice wild. So I was like, next turn I'm winning. This turn is just a formality. Next turn I'm winning. You know, like that was what was playing in my head, and I got lucky and it happened. But honestly, I may even be misremembering, and maybe this was 2 turns ago or so, not last turn. But I digress. That was sort of my headspace. I think I'd consigned myself to flipping at that point and just hoping I'd survive, and fairly confident I would. He plays the helping hand for that CP, which now picked the 6, and unfortunately I re-rolled it into a 6, which meant that now he was gonna have to discard because I had no CP to steal, and it was gonna be his twice as wild. That was what absolutely fired off my mentality of I'm getting an ult off this game.
And 1 and do helping hand. Reroll the 6.
Ah, come on, get in there.
Okay. Didn't need to think that hard. That's
I will attempt to walk the plank.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've got too many dice mods in hand. It'll go right over all his meditates. They will do nothing, you know. And then I just crunched the math and saw that I'd be able to beat him before having 2 turns of flipped pirate wasting away. It was just very unfortunate for him. It was a 1 in 6, you know, for that to be what it did. Because honestly, I probably would have just accepted the role and wouldn't have played any dice mods. It's kind of strange. I feel like he played so well, but none of it was risk taking. It was all risk averse, just about. Absolutely, the first game I took risks and failed miserably, I would argue. But
I mean, that's
there
how
comes a
risk
point
works
where,
sometimes.
yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, you call it something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like there comes that point in Dice Throne where you've got to go for it. You just sense like I've paid my dues by being patient and accepting of the dice, turn after turn after turn. I feel like karmically I'm due for being able to push my luck with picking up some dice that you could argue you probably shouldn't have, and getting lucky and getting 6s where you didn't think they would have come, or getting that lucky roll, like re-rolling the 6 into making him discard twice as wild. Like, dogs, excitement. Being able, like, whenever an opponent plays that safe, it feels like it's your game to win. You know what I mean? Like, just that mentality of like, and that's probably the perspective you should always have when you play Dice Throne. Which is why I don't like the Samurai that much. I feel like the Samurai is very gentlemanly in that he's going to be very consistent, and he's going to put the game in the opponent's hand to lose via unforced errors, or perhaps forced ones with dice hate cards. I don't like that playstyle with Dice Throne. I don't think it lends itself to tournament wins. And I feel like Monk is almost a graduated version of the Samurai in that regard. It is a very consistent game that will put it in the opponent's hand to win, rather than being your game to lose, or like, just in general with this, there's so many times I've had to put it in my opponent's hands. Like, don't beat me right now. Do not ult, please. Like, you will. The game in these last 2 turns of mine, or of yours, have been yours to win if you can ult or something as strong as. I've had a couple wins where that didn't happen. But if you can possibly afford the mentality of, this is my game to win rather than my opponent's to lose, or my opponent's to win, or what have you. And that luck may eventually dry out on me one of these days. I don't know. Absolutely be smart and safe, but eventually there's got to come a point where you've got to push your luck and hope for the best, because even a Shadow Thief will run out of dice mods, and you cannot roll shadows forever. Like, you will drain yourself of fix-its, samesies, try again, better D. You will run out, and you might even eventually reshuffle your deck. I've done it. But, I mean, you will run out. You will eventually have to win. From your own proaction rather than reaction.
Sure.
It's a very reactive game. Absolutely, it's a reactive game. I do not plan more than 2 turns ahead. I know I don't. That's why I say there are players that are smarter than me that I didn't deserve to beat. I can name like 2 or 3 of them easily. Like Johnny Six as being one, Dustin, Argon Jet being one. Foxy being one. I have no idea how much research you did, and you were undefeated. So you being one was absolutely a possibility. I didn't know, but I don't really plan too many turns in advance because you don't know what's going to happen that many turns in advance. Like or at least you can try to predict, but I don't. Like there's so many other things that I'm burning time and energy on mentally to decide what should I do, what shouldn't I do, what does my opponent have, what might they have, that I don't have the time to predict 4, 5, 6 turns in the future. And I would love for a meta to emerge that kicks my butt because I'm not doing that. That would be exciting. That would be very scary.
I mean, it
But
seems
that's where
likely. Like this game is still
yeah, it's
the competitive scene is still in its infancy, really.
yeah,
Like there haven't been that many events, and even though the game has been out for a number of years, COVID kind of dipped a lot of games' competitive scenes totally in amber. Uh,
yeah, absolutely stunted so many of them.
yeah, and things are starting to emerge again. So yeah, I would like to think that as the game evolves, so will the meta and the strategies and the play patterns. On some level, the deck's not being customizable does mean I think there's eventually going to be a ceiling. Like there will be a point where every character is kind of, or the optimized paths will all be known rather, but you still can't
Yeah,
guarantee you get it because of the variance that the dice inject into the game. So it puts it in a very weird place as far as again coming from a TCG background. I sort of feel like there should be a correct line and I should be able to know what it is. And Dice Throne has this wonderful way of kind of mixing that expectation up that I really enjoy.
when I was scrolling back up to see when my messages started with Slip, very early on, so about this time last year, I messaged him. I was a little worried with the competitive scene that there was going to be an answer. You know what I mean? That this game would be solved. That like there's got to be a one true meta for every character. Like let's say the monk. Like all aggro versus turtle or controlled. Splitting between the two. I was worried there was going to be an answer. Like okay, aggro is the best. Like you should probably always do that one. Which is why I loved that Foxy demonstrated two very different ways to play monk, and play them very well. Like I was absolutely like nerve racked,
I mean,
and
arguably, each of those play patterns, though, was the correct answer for the situation.
true. Yeah,
So even though there isn't one way to play monk, there might be one way to play monk against pirate. I don't know if we're
yeah, and
there
one way to
yet,
play against
but
thief, one way against pirate. Yeah,
yeah,
and I
exactly.
remember expressing that fear a year ago. Um, and I'm very glad that as pirate I have lost against Huntress. And that I fear Huntress as pirate. Legitimately, I do. I am very
She
happy
deserves
that
one
has not.
matchup.
It's one matchup that I hate. Yeah. But yeah, I'm very happy that that has not really been the case, and I look forward to like that's my hot take. That's my prediction. Is that mentality I said of like like I'm winning, so why change until I lose? And then you have to start. You need that hunger of loss to be able to innovate into victory, and then you'll stagnate, rest on your laurels, and you'll continue the cycle. Like life is
Sure.
all about that roller coaster of peaks and troughs. Like absolutely, tale as old as time. That's my hot take guess is that maybe the Aussies are already ahead of the more North American time zone metas, and that maybe Paladin and Monk will be the answers to your Pirate, Pyro, Thief, and Artificer. All aggro or high damage. Marvel might shake that up completely. Depends upon tournament organizers and what they want to do with the Marvel set. Absolutely, it's
Play
it's
it.
been balanced. Absolutely, it's been balanced against all the other seasons. So, heaven helping, like it can. I would like personally, and I can absolutely understand the perspective of others who don't want this to happen. But I would love for Marvel to be thrown right into the tournaments like everything else. I want to see
Yeah.
Huntress versus Black Panther. I want to see Captain Marvel versus Shadow Thief. Whatever.
What
Like I feel
what
like it'll spice it up a lot.
what possible reasonable perspective would there be to not play with the new toys?
Fair. I mean, but some people are funny about like when it like or I say funny. It's that's rude to say. Some people's perspective on mixing OG versus another IP. Some people have very strong opinions about not wanting that for their own individual reasons. I
Sure,
disagree,
man.
but I don't wish to
I,
invalidate.
I mean, if in your house the power fantasy that you want to have doesn't involve the barbarian fighting Black Panther, cool. But that doesn't get like you don't get to put that on the meta. Like you don't get to put that on the tournament scene. I don't- I will say I'll check my bias here. The game of versus, like my like core game that is very much a game that takes Buffy and X-Files and Marvel and Predator and Aliens and throws them all together. So like I'm way over that. Like
Absolutely, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, like mix your IPs, man. Like it is, it's
yeah.
it's um it's like that fountain drink, where you would just pour a little bit of every single one of them, as a kid. It's like, no, this is now legal. I can do that.
I mean, I feel like it's like opening my toy box when I was a kid and I have, my He-Man figure and I have my Batman figure and they get a fight. Like
Yeah. Goku
yeah,
versus
no.
Superman. Yeah.
Like if you don't want Marvel characters in the Dice Throne tournament scene, then you better hope they all suck. Otherwise, you're not going to be happy. I'm sorry.
Right. So, looking forward to that. I think there's a couple in there. I am happy to gloat that my name is in the rule book of the Marvel Dice Throne.
That's
I
pretty
was
cool,
in the
man.
I was in the beta test team, and so my name is in the credits at the end there. Makes me very happy. I love how my name looks in print. It's terrible. My last name is 11 letters, so it's atrocious, but it looks cool. Like I thank my parents for that. I'm really looking forward to Marvel coming out, shaking up the competitive perspective. Really looking forward to fresh eyes dissecting that, coming up with stuff that we didn't even think about in the beta test team. We tried to rules lawyer it to our absolute best to make sure that the game was not unbalanced and that nothing would break as far as the rules or what have you. We did our best, but I mean, just like when a magic pack releases, there's only so many human beings looking at it, and then once the entire world can look at it, there's going to be someone who comes up with a thing that you didn't even think of because you
Yeah.
were only so many people with only so much time. Absolute props to the credits of the Dice Throne team, the beta test team, the organizers, the designers, the creators, the artists. It is a beautiful package, an absolute joy to even be a very small part of. Looking forward to everyone getting their Marvel Dice Thrones later this year. The only real plugs I have are check out the Discords, like the the official Facebook community group and the official Dice Throne Discord are where I found your channel, where I found the DTOC3 channel, where I found the World Cup Dice Throne channel. Um, they're absolutely great, friendly resources, and um, my I put all my games on. I stream all my games on YouTube. Sometimes I stream others' games if it's convenient and helpful. If they didn't have it set up and I was free, I'll jump on and just stream their game for them. I'm happy to do it if I'm in a tournament or even not in a tournament and I can be a part of that. My YouTube and Twitch are my username I've had since literally more than half my life ago now. Kamui Thanatos. Kamui's Japanese, Thanatos is Greek, so it's just mixing pot of usernames that I found in very funny ways. And actually, you know what? Why? Let's just tell the world. Because I tell the story a lot, and there's so many words to it. Kamui I took from the anime movie X. It's literally just called X. It's a series, but I saw the movie. I thought it was so cool because they explained that his name translated to Power of God. I thought that was so cool. And Kami, like a character from Dragon Ball Z, Kami means God in Japanese as well. So Kamui, Power of God. And it's pronounced Kamui. It should be two syllables, and you kind of unconsciously say the U. But it's not Kamui, it's Kamui. Like, put the emphasis on the Cam. It's
We should have
I've been
started with
Kamui.
this.
Right? I've been Kamui my whole life, and I accept that. But for all interested, you pronounce it Kamui, and you just sort of unconsciously say the U. And Thanatos, I took from. It's the Greek god of death, right? But I found it via a dictionary in high school, in English class. The bookmark words at the top of a dictionary when you're flipping through it, one said death theory. And I was like, what? And I read it, and it was the posthumously, it was Freudian, it was the Freudian, like, psychoanalytical term for the opposite of eros, the opposite of the life theory, you know, and what life does to in all of the motivations and energies put forth to continue living. Thanatos was like the opposite. Or I'm sorry, death theory was the opposite. It was like an innate and unconscious tendency towards self-destruction postulated in the Freudian blah 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 blah. I've slept since then. But it then at the end said, see Thanatos, or like AKA Thanatos. That was so cool. And for about half a decade, I mispronounced it as Thanatos. That's wrong. It sounds cooler in my opinion, but that's wrong. It's either Thanatos or Thanatos. Those are the two correct ones. But so yeah, Kamui Thanatos has been my username since I was a teenager. You know, the self-destructive power of God. So edgy, so cool. Closet emo, what can I say? So that's where that username comes from for anyone ever curious. But yeah, Kamui Thanatos on Twitch and YouTube. That's where my games are, and any other games of Dice Throne that I happen to be able to have the privilege of streaming or shoutcasting on. That's where you can find those. That's where to go if you want to see some tournaments that I've been involved in. And thank you so much for being a tournament organizer.
Well, hey man, thanks for taking the time. This ended up going quite a bit longer than I thought it was going to, so I'm really appreciative of you soldiering through with your tender vocal cords. We don't want to damage your Henry Higgins.
The English teach the children how to speak. It's a blast, but do that high pitched while screaming to a theater.
All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully, we'll see you again when you win your next event.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure and a privilege.
All right, man. You have a good night.
Yeah, you too, good sir.